Hey guys, the individual that I interviewed wanted to remain anonymous, but he's a collegiate basketball player, and I didn't know this at the time, but he does have some background in psychology. He's taken some psychology classes, so he kind of knew what I was talking about, which really made the conversation pretty interesting. We first started talking about some of the mental toughness that went into basketball, kind of like arousal states and all that stuff, getting mentally prepared for games and stuff. And he recalled a time where the team that they were playing was not very good. They were very good, and he talked about how at practice all week they were all lethargic. They thought they automatically had a win and that they didn't need to put much into it, and they went the whole week kind of practicing like that. And game day came and they played like that. Some of the stuff we learned through reading the book and the lectures is consistency really pays off in these situations. And you have some games where there's an underdog and they come in with a more optimal arousal state than the team that's favored to win by a lot, and they end up winning. And in this case that happened, but it was a close game and it came down to the very last play, and one of the players was running quicker and the player that was supposed to cut to the ball was going a little bit slower, probably how he was practicing in practice, and the ball went out of bounds. And he also talked about how he mentally prepared for games, how he would go through the steps in the locker room. He was more of a low arousal state athlete. That's where he performed optimally. So he liked to kind of get away, listen to his music, and kind of calm down before a game where other people would be screaming at each other and stuff. And that's fine because, you piece it together and you perform best as a team when you have everybody playing at their optimal arousal state. He talked about how he used some imagery as well as some self-talk mechanisms, and he knew about them, but he didn't know in detail how to do them. Like, he didn't practice them on a regular basis. And he was talking about how in high school it was really effective, and when he got to college it wasn't as effective. And I think that could probably be because the competition level in college is a lot stiffer, and when he was in high school he was an all-star, so he probably didn't need that anyways. But what he would do is he would pretend like he was his favorite athlete, which happened to be Kevin Durant, and that's how he pictured himself playing. And he said he would do that mostly before every game, but he wouldn't do it in practice and stuff. And that goes back to consistency. Staying consistent helps you practice how you play pretty much. Basketball involves complex skills, so getting these arousal levels where they need to be are even more important, because in sports that aren't as complex, maybe something like track, you can function more efficiently when your arousal levels aren't optimal. The next thing that we really talked about was how basketball is a team sport. I think I briefly touched on how athletes' individual arousal levels come together to create what the team needs on the court as one in my paper. And there's 5 people on the court, and the individual that I interviewed, he actually mentioned the San Antonio Spurs is one of the teams that he thought demonstrated good cohesive teamwork. They have had good leadership with Tim Duncan. They still have Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. And you see in games, you can look at it and they pass the ball 7 or 8 times before they shoot it. And they're not just passing it to pass it, they're finding the open man and they're getting the best shot. And usually teams like that are successful. You see them make championship runs, and they don't necessarily need to have all-star players. So teamwork and team cohesion is a huge part. The individual that I interviewed won a state championship while he was in high school. He recalled how close the team was outside of basketball. They would hang out, they would go do stuff together, and they won a state championship. And he said they might not have been the best team out on the court, but they worked as the best team on the court. And he said when he got to college, it was a little bit different personalities coming together, and he thinks that really affected it. Plus, they weren't a group outside of basketball. They were in cliques and stuff, and they didn't work together as a team on the court either. We also talked about his past, trying to touch on intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. He's been playing basketball since he was a kid. He was probably 5 or 6 when he started playing pickup with his friends, and when he started growing into his size, his dad realized that maybe he had some potential, and his dad pretty much beat basketball into him, honestly, at that point. And I think that's when his shift went from intrinsic to extrinsic. He wasn't playing basketball anymore for the love of the sport. He actually, with some family issues along with him being pushed like that, was using basketball as a way to escape. And that's exactly what he got out of it. He got to college and was pretty far away from where he lived. And that's when the next thing I want to talk about happened. This extrinsic motivation, it has been beneficial. Professional athletes, they're really playing for their money, not that they aren't playing how they would have in Pee Wee when they were playing for the love of the game. And but before that happens, the extrinsic motivation that can happen in younger athletes, college down, that really aren't playing for money, it doesn't carry an athlete as far as actually wanting to be out there. Intrinsic motivation makes an athlete want to be first person on, last person off the field, work in their free time at their sport, and that's really the beneficial of the intrinsic motivation. And again, he kind of went into extrinsic motivation as he climbed the ranks, and when he got to college, he was supposed to be this superstar athlete and start and make a difference on the team. And he even said it himself, he kind of fell flat when he got to college because his extrinsic motivation to keep playing basketball was to get away from home, and he accomplished that. He was away from home, and at that point he really wasn't playing for anything anymore. And unfortunately, he's in his upper years in college, and he really hasn't had as much playing time as he was capable of. And that's because he didn't want to play it anymore. So he was just there to be there. And motivation is definitely, after this interview, probably a bigger factor than I originally pictured it. And any type of athlete that achieves their goal, whether maybe they were extrinsically motivated to play for their parents and they got somewhere to play for their parents, and what are they playing for anymore? Alright, I wanted to finish up on this by talking about task and ego-oriented athletes. Again, he recalled in his collegiate days a game where their star player, he was very ego-oriented from what he described. He was very high on himself, and he didn't put much time into the mental aspects of the sports like a task-oriented athlete would do. And this individual actually noticed him before one of the games. In warm-ups, he was kind of in a funk. He wasn't hitting any shots. You could see the distress on his face, and in ego-oriented situations, you really got to get to the athlete before they get into the game and kind of implode on themselves, because whereas task-oriented athletes have something to back themselves up on with knowledge of the sport, ego-oriented athletes are probably going to crumble if they're having a bad day. And in this case, it was also into the same game that I mentioned earlier when the athletes were in an under-aroused state. He was missing a lot of shots throughout the game, and towards the end of the game, they had a couple of tries to win, and this individual hogged the ball, and he missed the shots that he was taking. Where in a game where he was making the shots like he usually would, that would be a usual role for him. No one really noticed or alerted anyone that he was in a funk before the game, so it kind of got to the point where it was out of control, and he missed those shots, which ultimately, I guess, would have lost the game for the team, excluding the play where the point guard threw it out of bounds at the end because of the other player not getting there fast enough. So the orientation of athletes has a big impact, and I think after this interview, piecing it together with the entire class, sports psychology really does have an effect on sports, whether it's mental toughness or the type of athlete you are, or where you came from, and the types of motivations you have. And it's really interesting to see in different individuals and comparing it to my experiences and how you can see it, because honestly, basketball is a lot like lacrosse. I played lacrosse for 9 years, and I did the same types of things. It's a complex sport. You got to have your optimal arousal states. Same situations with teams being not as good as you and you overestimating and coming in lethargic, not playing up to your potential. You got ego and task-oriented athletes. And I also used narrowed down type of imagery before I really even knew what it was.